Let's talk about inflation. I said BOJ, not BOJ, sorry, Statin just released the latest inflation numbers yesterday, I think it was
Yes.
6.5%. So trending a little bit higher than we were before, uh,
Yes.
right outside of the target range, and the
Yes.
max of the range is 6%. So, what does that mean for us? Given monetary policy position from the BOJ, everything happening since Beryl, all that good and bad stuff.
Mhm. Well, it's the job of the monetary authority to prevent runaway inflation. Some moderate amount of inflation is important, 'cause it helps in revaluing securities. Um, so that is important. But post-Beryl, particularly, especially, of course, it is everybody's business to have to rise their income, if we can put it that, to maintain the standard of living, and that is a threat post-Beryl. Our agricultural sector was decimated. A good part of our agricultural production point, they call that era the basket of agricultural basket of Jamaica. If you look at the CPI, agricultural food and produce makes up in excess of 30% of the CPI. So you can see the impact that that will have. In fact, just looking at our last Friday the 13th newspaper, and I urge your listeners to scan the newspaper. Very powerful and critical information is in there. And on page 3, the headline says, large supermarkets step up vegetable imports post-Beryl. Yeah? So it's a matter of supply, but it also helps to contain inflation somewhat. So there are several things happening in the economy. One, private sector companies are doing what they can, but the government also is doing what it can. In order to drive production, the government has somewhat eased its monetary, well, not the government, sorry, the monetary authorities has eased its monetary policy. One, in terms of open market operations, they have somewhat easing or slightly releasing more fund in the financial system, with the intention that that goes into the productive sector, to ease inflation and to ease shortages. Right, so we hope it is directed that there's going to be a lagged effect, and I think that that lagged effect caused by one, the decimation of our agricultural sector, or a good part of our agricultural sector, and two, the resultant increase in energy cost. That has added a lot. Those two components are significant in the calculation of CPI, and those two have contributed a lot to the increase in the inflation rate. So I think BOJ, and of course by extension the government, and of course the productive sector, has interest in containing that. You can only see real growth in the economy when you contain inflation.
But we expected this spike given what happened with Beryl and given that, there is a lag in the reporting of the numbers.
Yes, yeah. It was expected. It was expected. And there are other tools that are used, but the monetary authorities are using. One, open market operation, in order to drive the productive sector to increase supply in the marketplace. That's one. If you look also in the same newspaper, we spoke about micro lending agencies, and speaking about mine lend. Yes, there's an article also, and I thought this is to be interesting. It says the microloans market is now valued at 46 billion Jamaican dollars, and it saw 15 percentage point growth uh, uh, um, over the comparative period last year, 2023 to 2024. However, this sector is extremely small. It makes up just about 1.7% of GDP and about 3.5% of the total value of the loans outstanding in the economy. The top 8 banking companies makes up about $1.3 trillion of loan balances. So it is
Wow.
still small, right? But it has outpaced the growth of the traditional lending institution. So there's great value there, and that is where we hope, and the releasing of the easing of the liquidity tightness by BOJ, they're hoping that that now can also help, even at the micro level, in driving small businesses, especially farmers. They're releasing more loans and assistance to them to kind of ease the supply situation that we're facing. So this
So
is
for those who are saying nobody gonna be borrowing at those rates, Clive just proved you wrong. It is
yes.
growing.
Yes, and remember the cash crops, which are crops that over a period of what 3 to 6 months, the turnover that is from plant to reaping. It's not like a tree, a mango tree or so that is planted and takes several years to grow to maturity, or one of those other cash crops. Those persons will, because they may not extend these loans in excess of a year, it may not be such a pressure on them. I mean, 40 percentage points annually, yes. But more than likely, these persons will turn it over at the end of each cash crop cycle. So, as you've rightly stated, our credit card that we pay monthly, we have an obligation to pay down on monthly, is burdensome, but doesn't seem that onerous on us because of the fact that we constantly are paying on that balance, hopefully reducing it somewhat, or eliminating it totally. But there is a market for that. And it has been growing. Access Financial, we see quite a few. They said over 200 microfinance companies are in the economy. Over 60 to 80 have already registered with the Bank of Jamaica. So this sector is growing and has a lot of capacity, and there's a need for them in the economy also. But there are quite a few areas in the economy that is not touched by the traditional banking sector.
Right.
And
D says micro lending is high risk, high reward. And another point as well. So Sean wants to know where do you get those numbers? I want to keep up with them too. Which article were you reading from?
if I can show this is the Friday's financial gleaner, right? And $46 billion payday. This is it. This is the article. It's on page 2. And let me quickly show you some piece of interesting article. Large supermarkets here. Large supermarkets, step up import, post-Beryl, very critical. You just scan these and then they can come back to your show and ask questions and get clarification. This micro lending, 46 billion, really interesting article. Here's some good pieces of information that is important, especially in discussion like this. International, where's our money going? When BOJ eases liquidity, where is it going? This is published by the Statin and the PIOJ, International Merchandise Trade, and it shows where our imports goes. And you can see, interestingly, that looking at this, our import bill January 2024 to April 2024 substantially comprised of raw material and intermediate goods, fuel and lubricant, capital goods, and transport equipment. Consumer good is third, yes, but of the capital goods is just perhaps about 15% of the value of our import now. Consumer goods. So I think the economy is more focused now on the productive sector. And I think the incentives offered by the government and also to our monetary policy is kind of trying to drive that area more to ease the inflation rate. So yes, post-Beryl inflation, we see it. As a matter of fact, hopefully, that figure, 6.5 percentage point inflation rate CPI, August, hopefully by September, October, it may be reduced if fuel in particular, energy, if we see that either stability in that, we may see that inflation rate go down. Interestingly also, BOJ intervenes, the monetary authority intervenes in the economy, in stabilizing the economy and inflation through the FX market. So every now and then they'll put FX, foreign exchange, in the marketplace to satisfy demand so as not to drive the rate, the Jamaican dollar value down. So I think JPS stated that a part of the reduction in our bill this month incoming will be as a result of a revaluation of the FX
They
portion.
switch back to their regular fuel source. So during
Yes,
burial, they had to use a more expensive fuel source, and now they're
yes.
switching back.
Exactly. So, and that would impact FX, that would impact fuel and cost. So you can, by just looking at this particular report, and you can just come back to your program, ask us some questions. You can have an idea of what may probably what could contribute to inflation and where significant expenditure is going, what particular part of the economy we may see growth based on where there's heavy importation. And therefore,
Mm.
it might give you an idea of what particular securities on the market you should put your investable dollar in. Another interesting article to look at is the producer price index. All of these are published in our newspaper, particularly the Sunday papers that has a financial news, the Wednesday paper. So just remember,
And
Sunday,
Friday.
Wednesday, and Friday. Remember those days, right?
And Statin also publishes those lovely graphics on their IG
Yes,
page on
yes.
social media.
Exactly. And also, there's a nice piece of information. This is called the Jamaican Economic Statistics, printed in all the newspapers. You should have a look at that. Let me see if I can get it in front of you. Jamaican Economic Statistics. And it has everything on it from inflation rate, um, treasury bill rates, savings and loan, mortgage rates, inflation, monthly and annual, producer price index. Beautiful pieces of information in that. So have a look at that, particularly the Friday publications of both newspaper has all this information.
So James wanted to know which paper that was. It's the Gleaner, James, but Observer also carries similar news and information. Hence, our correspondent David is always on
Yes,
explaining what's going on in the news. And for
yes.
those of you who were asking earlier about, what's the play for Mindland, saying that you can't buy into CWJ because that's no longer listed. Well, JMMB is a partner in the joint venture. So if you want exposure to what's coming up with Mindland, JMMB is always there as an option. David, you look like you want to jump in bad.
Sorry, I was gonna say JMB for one is a 50.5% partner in that venture, so they're the majority shareholder in it. That's the first thing. The second thing is Clive made some very good points. The newspaper, it's a very, very valuable resource. Although you might read the stories online, to actually look at the physical print and see some of the ads or other content, it does educate you a lot.
It
So
sure
I know,
does.
so I know
That's why
personally that
I do the e-paper.
it
'Cause
pays for itself. It pays
yeah,
for itself.
I do the e-paper subscription because you're absolutely right. Sometimes the ads that come beside the article are just as informative as the article. So online, you're not going to see that statin graphic unless you do e-paper
Right, exactly.
and those
Well,
types of things.
one thing
So let me take a couple comments before we go. D says Clive proving the usefulness of traditional media. Shell said Clive the teacher. Everybody Applebee teacher no. Yeah. All right. So we're gonna leave it there. Monroe
ju-
says so wonderful. Thank you, Clive. And so thanks to both Clive and David in this segment. We
one
appreciate
last
you
thing.
guys as usual. We'll take our
One last
final
thing,
break.
Kalila.
You always have one last thing when I'm wrapping up, David, every single
Hey,
time without fail. Make it
well,
quick. What's the last thing?
tomorrow is a big day. What big day is it? The U.S. Federal Reserve is going to announce its monetary policy reduction. But what
Oh,
is it going to be? 25 basis points, 50 basis points, 75? That's going to be the big news of tomorrow. And
Yes.
for those who follow Jamaica, September 30th is the BOJ's next monetary policy decision. So tomorrow is going to be a big, spectacular day on the U.S. stock market or just for the global markets, because if it's 25, 50, everybody's happy. 75, we're on the moon.
Mm-hmm. And can I say something also in this same publication by the Statin, it published in both newspaper Observer also, right? It will look at our trading partners, the top 5 import trading partners in US millions of dollars, right? And it shows that the United States about 65% of our imports come from the US. So you can see how important the US dollar is to our economy, and therefore any policy, their federal policy, federate is important to us also, right? A reduction in that will ease the pressure off ours. A reduction in interest rate there means that persons may shift or maintain US dollar in our economy, hard currency in our economy, and make it more available here then, and therefore reduce the demand or the pressure on the Jamaican dollar running down that US dollar.
D says I think David Ago says national holiday.
We're not in St. Lucia. We're not in St. Lucia. It's not Julian Alfred Day. It's not Julian Alfred Day.